Welcome to Martial Arts World Radio. I'm your host, Joseph Clark. Do you have what it takes to be a champion at what you do? How do you measure success? We ask these and other relevant questions of today's martial arts stars. Each week in every show, we speak to different fighters from the UFC, Olympic martial arts medalists, and world champion martial artists or kickboxing icons, many of whom have gone on to become stars of martial arts cinema. I have a book to bring to your attention. Check out the book Ultimate Warrior Workouts by Martin Rooney, a complete illustrated collection of proven training techniques from around the globe. Also check out The Tao, T-A-O, The Tao of MMA at Amazon, or Google The Tao of MMA. If you're looking to dust off a good action movie, check out the first Ong Bak, O-N-G-B-A-K, Ong Bak movie starring Tony Jaa. Amazing Muay Thai choreography. This week's inspirational quote is from Buddha and goes as follows: "Endurance is one of the most difficult disciplines, but it is to the one who endures that the final victory comes." Hindu Prince Gautama Siddhartha, the founder of Buddhism, 563 to 483 BC.
This is Olivier Gruner. You are listening to Martial Arts World Radio with Joseph Clark.
Unquestionably one of, if not the greatest kickboxing champion of all time, Don the Dragon Wilson is the only kickboxer to win 11 world titles in 3 weight divisions: light heavyweight, super light heavyweight, and cruiserweight, and for 6 sanctioning organizations. Along the way, he defeated 11 other world champions, 12 number 1 contenders, and 15 champions on 4 continents. He has also starred in over 35 films, made notable appearances in dozens of other productions, and he has been a screenwriter, producer, director, and of course, fight choreographer. I interviewed Don at Bob Wall's house just outside of Los Angeles, California. Here is that interview. Here in Bob Wall's kitchen in Tarzana, California, and I'm interviewing Don the Dragon Wilson. Don, welcome to Martial Arts World Radio.
Hi, Joseph. Thank you for inviting me to speak to your listeners.
Now, Don, as I understand it, in the early days of the UFC, you were approached about a fight that never happened. Would you share that experience with us?
Yes, actually, in the very beginning, I was approached to be an announcer, but I told them that I was still considering fighting, so we spoke about entering the tournament, which, of course, you know, I'm a traditional kickboxer, and I don't like fighting 8 guys in one night or whatever, getting in an 8-man tournament. So I told them I'd fight Royce Gracie, and because we're around the same size, and he's known to be a grappler, I'm known to be a striker, so I thought the audience would like that, and a verbal agreement was made. But they also requested that I come in and announce the fights to kind of get to know the audience and the audience, their specific audience, to know me. So after I announced several fights, I asked them when were they going to give me the fight with Royce Gracie. And they said, well, because I wanted 20% of the gross. They said, well, we're not prepared to give any percentages as of today. So when they went against what we had agreed, I dropped out as an announcer.
And when you were in the ring, who was your toughest competitor?
Oh, you know what? I cannot possibly distinguish because from 1980 on, after I became a champion, most everybody was tough in some way. Even though I may have ended some fights early, they were still dangerous fighters, and they had, you know, when you become a champion, they will no longer pay for you to fight unranked fighters. You fight contenders or other champions, people considered the best. So, yeah, they were all pretty tough fighters. I guess Bronco Sikatic could have been one of my most difficult because I went into the fight with a broken hand. I broke it the week before the fight. Then I broke my other hand during the fight. So when you're fighting and you've got 2 broken hands, it's not an easy day at the office.
Over time, did you have to adapt your style and start progressing it throughout your career?
Yeah, I think all fighters do that. You adapt to the sport itself was changing very rapidly as I started. The rules were changing. So the rules, the weight divisions, I mean, you know, the many different associations, that means you've got to constantly adapt just to that. But the training methods, things like that, it was evolving. The UFC is going through not just the UFC, but I mean mixed martial arts, is going through the same kind of thing. The only place where they pretty stay consistent, which we did not in kickboxing, was the rules. The rules in these MMA fights are mainly the same. But in kickboxing, you could fight with low kicks, without low kicks, with elbows, without elbows, knees, without knees. So we had another kind of aspect of our sport that was difficult.
Over time, how did the rules change in kickboxing? Did it start off that you couldn't do low kicks and then you eventually could do low kicks, elbows? Was Muay Thai incorporated over time?
In kickboxing in America, first of all, they didn't even call it kickboxing. They called it full contact karate. So what we did was we took tournament karate, which was fought on a mat, and we kind of simulated that. There were no ring ropes in the first fights. In fact, my first fight was not even on a mat. My first fight was on a concrete floor. So that's the way tournaments were done. Tournaments were done on floors, and they thought full contact could be done that way. So it went from the idea of karate, traditional karate, full contact karate, to more like the kickboxing they have in the Orient.
Did you compete all around the world, or was it mostly in North America?
Oh, I fought all over the world. I fought 6 times Arctic.
Did the audiences differ?
Yeah, you know what, the audience, what I found this, though, this is one thing, if you don't mind, I'm going to change it and tell you what the audiences Arctic.
Did the audiences differ?
Yeah, you know what, the audience, what I found this, though, this is one thing, if you don't mind, I'm going to change it and tell you what the audiences worldwide or how they're similar is, they want the winner to win. Like I fought the German champion in Berlin, win. Like I fought the German champion in Berlin, the Italian champion in Rome, the British champion in London. I mean, I fought everybody's backyard. Now, at the beginning of the fights, they wanted their local guy to win, of course. But by the end of the fights, they were all cheering when I won because I dominated the fights, and their whole shift in support went to whoever was the winner. And so I found audiences have been very fair worldwide. Judges, newscasters, not so much.
Sounds kind of like the old gladiator days where you earn the audience's respect and then you earn the win and their approval of the win.
You are the first person to put it in those terms, and I realize now that that's exactly how it is. You know, possibly one of the emperors or something in Rome might have wanted the fighter to be, maybe he didn't like the fighter for whatever reason, but if the audience is cheering and they say thumbs up, then he gets the win. But, you know, regardless of what the audience said, I was picked up and carried out of an auditorium once, and they were chanting Wilson, Wilson the whole time, and the fight was declared to draw. But the audience was trying to tell me in their own way, which was pretty obvious, that they felt I won. It was in Montreal, and it was against Johnny Theriault, who was Canadian and the local favorite. And, yeah, but during the 12-round fight, they felt I won, and they were kind of trying to make up for the judging, Canadian judges saying it was a draw and not a win for me. So that's one of the things. Now, as far as decisions, the 4 decisions that I've lost, and I have lost 4 decisions, I did not feel I lost them. I feel the 3 guys around the ring just said the other guy won more points than I did. So I didn't feel like they were losses. But the one loss I do have on my record, undeniable, was a TKO against a guy named Glenn McMorris. And it is a strange thing, but my life is full of strange, bizarre coincidences. But the fighter with the worst record that I ever faced, which was 9-6 at the time, knocked me out in the first round. That was Glenn McMorris. I was the #1 contender. He was a ranked fighter, so he had some skills. But it was I made a mistake, and he capitalized on it. And I give him all the credit, but I never made that mistake again. And I teach in all my seminars. Every seminar I teach exactly the mistake I make so that nobody who takes my seminar will make the same mistake. And but that is my one loss that I consider a loss in 28 years of fighting. So I think I did pretty good for a kickboxer.
Going back to that UFC fight that never took place with Royce Gracie, if that fight had taken place, what would your strategy have been against such an aggressive grappler?
Certainly it'd be to win on the striking end. Now, people don't realize I started off as a collegiate wrestler. I mean, and they don't know Bill Wallace was the same way. Bill Wallace was a wrestler. In fact, his trainer was Dan Gable, the best wrestler in the nation, Olympic wrestler. And Bill went to judo, and then he went to karate, and then full contact. But most martial artists, Joe Louis was a grappler. Grappling is part of self-defense. And so I started off in wrestling, grappling. They just didn't have a sport at that time in martial arts that you could compete with to add that. Now they add it. So in a way, I've been a mixed martial artist my whole career. I can punch, I can kick, I can elbow, knee, and I can fight on the ground. And I did work out with jiu-jitsu people, of course, knowing that that's what Royce would do. But, of course, my strategy would not be to dominate on the ground. My strategy is to dominate on my feet. I mean, it's not even no disrespect to him because he's not a striker. But if Royce Gracie wants to fight me in a 12-round kickboxing match, I will fight him for free. I will donate my fight purse to the charity of his choice. I make that open offer. I did that with Matt Hughes, by the way, and he, no promoter either put it together. But at one time, Dana White called me and asked me to fight Matt Hughes, which I agreed to do. That would have been an interesting fight, I thought, because at the time they were saying he was the best pound-for-pound MMA fighter in the world at 170, and I fought at 175, and I fought at between 165 to 175, so I could have easily fought him at 170. But, yeah, Dana White was the reason why that fight didn't happen.
What do you think of the UFC today? Do you follow it?
I'm not a fan of, I'm not a fan of any fighting. None. I don't watch boxing. I don't watch kickboxing. I don't watch MMA. If my friend is competing, I'll support my friends. I'll go to fights. They pay me to go to fights. And I'm not saying I don't enjoy watching. I do. But what I learned about myself is I'm a selfish athlete. I study fights when it's going to benefit my fighting style. When I'm not doing it, I don't really have much interest in just sitting in the stands watching. When I played football, I watched every football game. I was the MVP of my high school football and basketball teams, and I watched basketball, football nonstop when I played. But once I hung up the helmet and I quit dribbling the basketball, I haven't watched a game in years. I don't watch the Super Bowl. I don't watch NBA playoffs. I watch no sports, none.
Don, how did your career progress from being a professional athlete to an actor?
I made up the decision in 1985. I did one movie it was a Chinese movie in '82 in New York City called ABC in Chinatown, but it was not to become an actor. It was on the basis of Chuck Norris's recommendation that I moved to L.A. This was my actual first retirement. I retired in '85. I moved to L.A. and I made the attempt to make a transition from fighter to actor. But within, I think less than a year, I was out of money, and people were offering me fights. So I said, you know what, I can do both. I can train, fight, and try to be an actor, and that's what I did. But by 1990, within 5 years, I was making so much money as an actor, and anybody who knows kickboxing knows you don't make much money there, that it became a hobby. When it costs you money to do something, it's no longer a career. It is called a hobby. And it was an expensive hobby because I was making 10 times as an actor what I was making as a fighter. So I retired again, and that was 1990. So that's the second retirement. And I didn't come out of retirement until 98 when I got a fight offer by Viewer's Choice to fight Dick Kimber. And that money was, they gave me $150,000 just to sign the contract, and then 12% of the pay-per-view. So that was a great deal. And I did fight 3 fights, but then realized that, it was very, very difficult to get the boxing license because boxing still controls kickboxing and MMA, the athletic commissions. And it was very difficult at 48 to get one. I would fight tonight if there was a proper money order, a decent money offer. But at 62, the idea of an athletic commission giving me a license is pretty far-fetched, I think. It was hard for me to get the license when I came out of retirement in my late 40s. I could imagine in my 60s what the athletic commission would say.
When you were preparing for a film, would you actually, when you had a film that was impending, would you actually train as though you were preparing for a fight so that you looked good for the film, or was that required?
Once I signed to do a film, I look at the character and I see what should the character look like, and so I try to match my build to what I'm supposed to look like. But it's always better to drop some weight before a film. So I will always diet down. But sometimes I've gone into weight training programs when it calls for a character that possibly would have more physical size. But I always diet. for the films. I always drop 10 to 15 pounds, and I think it's a standard thing, good thing for most actors. Probably 90% could. You don't have to walk around in fighting shape, and you don't have to walk around in filming shape, but you should, before you get on camera. It's always good to drop weight, and I pretty consistently do that.
You said you moved to L.A. Where did you move from?
I'm from Florida. I grew up in Florida. We moved there when I was 4 years old from Alton, Illinois, where I was born. And so I spent my whole life in Florida until I moved to L.A. in '85. I'm from the South. I'm Asian looking, and when I first moved out here, my best friend was Chris Penn, Sean Penn's younger brother. And Sean said to me, and he knows the business, he said, "Don, you're going to have a hard time in this business." And I said, "Why?" And Sean said, "Because they don't write roles for 6-foot-tall Asians with Southern accents." But you know what? They didn't write roles for Arnold Schwarzenegger. He became the highest paid actor in the world. If you remember, they didn't write roles for bodybuilding champions with Austrian accents. But, one thing about the film business is that the rule that everybody will agree to is nobody knows anything. And if you understand that about the business, because nobody knows how careers can manifest themselves and what the audience is ultimately going to fall in love with.
So, Don, when you were doing that transition and you were going around Los Angeles and Hollywood promoting yourself and attempting to land a career as an actor, were you going through the traditional steps that an actor trying to break into Hollywood would go through, or were you promoting yourself as a world champion kickboxer who should be considered for starring roles in his own action films?
I did not try to start off thinking I was going to be a box office star of the first film out. What I did was I started taking acting lessons. I was auditioning for agents. You got to get an agent or you're not going to go out for anything. And I got an agent. Actually, I got Shogasugi's agent. We have the same agent. And later, Cynthia Rothrock went with him. I mean, he's known to be the agent for independent martial art action guys. But anyway, his name's Ray Cavalieri, and it's the only agent I've ever had. I've still got him to this day. So from '85 till now, the same agent. That's an aberration in the film business. Usually, you keep changing your agents depending on what kind of jobs they say they can get you. But I don't do that. I stick with my agent, and I've been with him since '85. But I just did the normal Hollywood thing. You audition, and I did. My first job was a bad guy on General Hospital, and I did that for 3 months. I was part of one of their story arcs, and I was what they called a U5, which means under 5 lines a day. I was only allowed to say 5 lines. If I said one over, it'd be against the union, and they'd have to pay me more money. It'd be a big problem for me. But, I started off just taking jobs. And it wasn't until Blood Fist that I had a starring role. And that was '88. So I had only been out to Hollywood for about 2.5 years. And that's not really considering paying your dues. 2.5 years is pretty short from going to nobody to starring in movies. That was released by MGM. It was a big, tremendous success and started my whole career. So, 2.5 years is not a long time when you think guys like Jack Nicholson, who are obviously we know he's talented, correct? Well, he spent the first 14 years as an actor working for minimum wage. In other words, no producer, no director ever thought he had as much talent as the next guy and was willing to pay him $1 more than the minimum wage for an actor. Talent is not always obvious. And I don't know if I had much talent. Now, looking back, I think I had great acting teachers. Just like I believe Chuck Merriman and my brother, and I had great teachers in martial arts. And I was just lucky. I studied what they call the Stanford Meisner technique and of acting. And then I did this Charles Conrad studio for quite a while, which was really good. And then I had Ivana Chubak as a private. Look, Ivana Chubak has worked with the top actors. I believe she worked with Leonardo DiCaprio, but I'm not positive about that one. But Charlize Theron. She was her acting coach. So this is an action teacher, kind of like a master acting coach, like a master martial artist. There's a lot of similarities with acting and martial arts, but that's one of them. The teacher should get a lot of the credit, not most of the credit, but a lot of the credit for your performance.
Was Blood Fist written specifically for you?
As a matter of fact, Joseph, Blood Fist wasn't even written for an agent. When they called me in, They had already cast the brother, and he's Caucasian, and when they saw me, they didn't know. Here's how the audition started. Casting director was told by Roger Corman when Blood Sport came out to get a world champion. So they opened up a magazine and said, Don Wilson, Beverly Hills, California. That's where I lived at the time. And world champion, light heavyweight champion. And so they looked at the phone book, and I was listed, because back in those days, you list yourself. And the casting director called me on my home phone and said, if you're the Don Wilson that's the kickboxer, we'd like for you to come in and read for a role. And I was the Don Wilson that was a kickboxer. And I went in, and as soon as he saw me, he said, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson, this is for a Caucasian lead. The brother's already been cast, but maybe you can be the bad guy. So I said, okay, I'll be the bad guy. I didn't, I'm trying to get any part. And I went in and I read one time for the casting director, and he stopped and he looked at me and he said, I'll be right back. He leaves the room. He says, comes back in, he says, Roger Corman wants to meet you. Now, I didn't know Roger Corman at the time, which was a great thing. Had I known who he was, that he started Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, Francis Ford Coppola, Jonathan Demme, Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard. If I'd known he was the man who was known to be the best eye for talent and could create careers, I would have been nervous. More nervous than I even was. But I wasn't too nervous because I already was told I was going to get the job, that, maybe read, you get something else. And so he said, Roger Corman wants to meet me. So I leave his office, and I go into Roger Corman's office, and Roger does not have me read right off the bat. He just says, Don, tell me about yourself. And I told him I was a kickboxer, that my friend Chuck Norris advised me to try to be an actor, and this, I'm moved out to Hollywood, and this is what I want to do for a living. So he says, read for me, please. So I start the reading, start the audition. I get about, 4 or 5 lines into the scene. He stops me. Now today, having 30 years experience as an actor, that's usually a kiss of death. That means they don't even want to waste enough time to get the rest of the scene out. They want you out that door so they can see the real guy. But what he did was he looked at me and said, Don, you're going to star in this movie. He said, you're going to do martial art movies. He said, you're going to do action movies. He said, much, much later in your life, you'll be a famous dramatic actor. He handed me the script. He said, you leave in 2 weeks. He made his mind up right then. Now, a lot of my friends say, well, how did you do such a great audition? That Roger Corman would just cast you. And I said, now looking back, it is the only audition that I have ever done well, really. I've never done, that's the one. And it's because it was at the point where the character learns that his trainer murdered his brother. The one he's looking for is actually the trainer. And I'm very close to my brother. My brother was my martial art instructor. He was my manager. And we work very close. He's produced 2 films for me in the last year. My brother and I are close. He's a year and a half older than me. And I just did the first acting lesson, which is substitution. You substitute. If this guy you're in the scene with had killed your brother, how would you react? And I was able to, I told people today, I was able to fool Roger Corman. He thought I was a great actor. But I was able to be real in that scene because I did that substitution. And I'm not saying Roger later was disappointed with me, but I'm very certain no one else that he had been reading, the real kickboxing champions, I guess, because he was, I did recognize some people from the Jet Center, some other people in the waiting room to audition. But the other kickboxers obviously were not given the performance that he wanted. And I did 12 movies with Roger Corman, started in 12 of his films, and that started in 30 films now, and that was the launch of my career.
Don, you are no doubt an inspiration to many martial artists. Who were your inspirations?
I'm like everybody else. I mean, Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is one of my first and strongest. But Chuck Norris, because I actually knew Chuck, and I did talk to a lot of people. I mean, I wasn't in his generation. He was in the, I believe he retired in '72. But he was the '60s, but he was known to be the best. And I got a lot of respect for Chuck, and I try to emulate a lot of his lead as far as the entertainment, the transition from athlete to entertainer. And if I could say I have one major person that is my personal hero, it would be Chuck Norris. But then again, Bruce Lee's philosophy of fighting and everything, of course, I also have him. But his is more like a fan thing. But Chuck and I have been personal friends for years, and he's been great for me. He used to go to my fights and support them. He announced them. he put me in Walker, Texas Ranger just before it was ending, just so I could be a part of it, which I really appreciated that. When he called me, he said, Don, we're wrapping up Walker. I want you to be on it. And I said, oh, send me the script. And he laughed. He said, Don, you don't need the script. He said, you're playing Don the Dragon Wilson. So I don't have to get into character. All I have to do is remember what he wants me to say. And it was fun. Me, Bill Wallace, if you remember the episode was called Legends, Joe Lewis, we all got together and did one of the last episodes of Walker.
When you were a professional kickboxer, did you ever have people on the street who tried to test your mettle?
Just conservatively tell people I'm probably 150-0 on the street. Because I worked in a bar for over 5 years. If I got into one fight a week, that'd be 50 fights. We get into 3 fights in a night on a Friday night. Now, when I say fight, I don't mean a 12-round war. I mean, you slap a guy a couple of times, you hit him once, maybe in the stomach, and the fight's over. They're done. It's usually, because being a bouncer in a club, you're not there to beat people up, actually. You just have to be able to keep yourself from getting beaten up, and sometimes you will have to dish out a little to stop the guy. But you're there to keep the peace, because you can't have chairs getting broken or windows or what, you can't have customers seeing a fight and running out of the club. So anyway, I was a peacekeeper basically. So those kind of fights, I had many of them. And I really, there's so many misnomers, the misconceptions of martial arts. I've heard this many times. They used to say it in the UFC. Well, all fights, 80% of fights end up on the ground. Well, you know what? They do not. Not a single fight a guy grabbed me, took me to the ground. Now, I was already a wrestler then, so I could tie these guys, normal guys, into a knot. But I'm just saying, people don't know how to ground. They're not trained. It's not like a bunch of jiu-jitsu black belts fighting in bars. And we're talking the 70s. That's when I worked in a bar. It's just a drunk guy, overweight, and he might have played football. He might have done a little sports. He might have played basketball or something. So maybe he's in shape and he's got aggression. He's had one too many drinks, and he wants to throw a big, sloppy, wide punch. Well, it's easy to stop guys like that if you're any kind of level of martial artist. And the hard part is I have gone in front of judges before, and this was fighting 3 guys. But I was the one that was in legal trouble. Because when you're a black belt, and I was a kickboxer, and the other guys are, 2 of them are college students, one of them works part-time at a house of pancakes. They look like the ones that are defending themselves. Doesn't look like. It's hard for you to make it look like this is a case of self-defense, Your Honor. Well, anyway, I never got in trouble with the law. I mean, I was in front of judges, so that's a certain amount of trouble. But I was not convicted or whatever. He did release me. I had witnesses that I was hit first, and so I had enough on my side, enough right on my side. But as a martial artist, none of us should ever take pride in beating the untrained fighter. I mean, imagine me as a kickboxer. If you just point at a guy in a mall and you say, Don, I want you to fight him 12 rounds in a kickboxing match. And I get him in the ring and I knock him out. And what pride? Now, if you got a guy who's been training for 15, 20 years, he's undefeated. Like Rocco Sikatic was like 32-0 with 29 knockouts or something. When you beat that guy, you can brag all over the place. You should brag and brag and brag about that win, which I do. But, self-defense on the street, people when they say, well, that kickboxing looks good in the ring, but what about the streets? It's like this. This is how I can compare it. All right, a street fighter is like a street tennis player. If once in a while a guy with a little potential, he's an athlete, he's in shape, picks up a tennis racket and hits it once in a while, how can he go up against a guy like Bjorn Borg, Jimmy Connors? I mean, you take the tennis greats. When you beat them, that's something you brag about. You don't brag about just knocking out some untrained fighter on the street. And so that's why professional athletes, I don't think, guys like Mike Tyson or anybody, who actually, someone like Hoist Gracie, if he beats a guy who's untrained, not even a black belt in anything, is Hoist going to brag about that? Street fighting on the street, while the X factor, which is knives, guns, weapons, multiple opponents, that can make it a interesting competition and makes it more dangerous for you. But a one-on-one with an untrained guy, it's not even fair.
Don, in or out of the ring, what has been the single biggest challenge you've ever had to face in your life?
Being a good father is, and a lot of any family guy knows what I'm talking about. Being a good father, making the right decisions with your family, that's the hardest thing to do. That makes kickboxing look like just chicken feed. It's just like very easy. I mean, life is not always as cut and dry as the ring. I know who my opponent is in the ring. And we have a set of rules, and you go by the rules. So the X factor is taken out of it. But when you're in every day-to-day life, making the right decision with your children, or with relationships and things and career choices, those are much more difficult. And you know what? You don't have to be a kickboxing champion to face that kind of stuff every day. You just got to be a parent. And so I have a lot of respect for anybody who has a family and their kids are doing well, because I know the parents did well. It's not a coincidence that the kids are doing well. You know, as a parent yourself, you know there's a lot of guidance. And the main thing, as kids, every second they're on this earth, they're cutting the ties to us as the parents. And our job is not to make them dependent on us. Our job is to teach them to be able to live without us. Right? We want them to be successful. It's kind of like in the old days, in the evolutionary days, 1,000,000 years ago. We have to teach them enough about the environment to be able to go out and hunt themselves, right? Because we're not going to be there always hunting and bringing home the bacon for the family. So that's the hardest thing. That seems to be the most difficult thing in life, is to raise your kids in the right way so that they're prepared for modern society to be successful.
Don, our last wrap-up question, what is your philosophy and advice on dealing with loss?
I tell people, losing money, losing your house, losing your job, to me, that's just the messiness of life. I try to have sympathy, but like if somebody, during the stock market crash of the Great Depression, he was a billionaire, and then he loses his money, jumps out of the building, kills himself. Well, you know what? He's not even in debt. He just loses the money that he's got, and he can't even live another day. I just don't have sympathy for people like that, because I go to third world countries where they're looking for water every day. That's a concern. They are looking for clean water. And in our country, I sit with people that throw a fit if their steak is not cooked right. That's the big problem he's had all day long. So you got to take things in perspective. Either health and well-being and happiness of your friends and family are your strongest concern. Everything else you have to take in stride. You're going to have ups and downs in your career. You're going to have ups and downs financially. It's a roller coaster ride. And if the life was not a roller coaster ride, it'd be very boring. And I think the yin and yang, having lived without money, you enjoy having money. Now, if you were just born like Donald Trump and you have it, and you've always had it, and it's just a matter of how much are you going to have, well, I don't think he has not lived. I don't think he doesn't seem to be able to relate to the people that are, most of this planet is just looking for clean water. I mean, it's the truth. I think the number is something like in the 40,000 children under the age of 5 die every day of preventable disease and illness, preventable causes. And that's a tragic thing when you think about it. But, I'm not holding anything against guys like Donald Trump, the 1%. But I just mean you got to be able to relate to the real problems and not stress out over first world problems. Third world problems are finding clean water to drink every day. And I remember once I was watching something, one of the stars, I don't know, it was Matt Damon or somebody, was asking this girl, she's got to walk like 3 or 4 miles every day just to get water. And then she walks back, and it's to provide water for her family. So she's carrying back some heavy water, and she's just a little girl. And so I don't sweat the small stuff of life, It's just, I try to, if my family is healthy first, and then happy second, it's a good day for me, and it's just a matter of how much, I'm not saying I don't have ambitions, but how much further up you can go, because you're already starting way above other people. If you've got the friends and family are healthy, the rest is relative.
Great wisdom from Don the Dragon Wilson. Don, congratulations on your fight career. Congratulations on your acting career, and we just appreciate you taking the time to speak to us today.
Well, thank you very much. And, everybody listening, when you say congratulations, my success is responsible for the audiences that have supported me. And there used to be a sports audience of kickboxing fans, and now it's movie fans, action movie fans. So I appreciate that and would like to say thank you to all your listeners who have ever watched my movies. And by the way, people put them up on YouTube. Now hopefully no producer's going to get mad at me, But there's a lot of you just watch them free. I already got paid. I got paid 25 years ago. But I had a movie come out in Spanish, which was kind of unusual. It was a prison movie I did called Forced to Fight, and it's been viewed over 1 million times in 2 years. So people are watching movies online more and more. And I'd like to thank all my fans, and as long as they keep watching them, I'll keep making them.
Thanks again, and all the best to you, Don.
Thank you.
You have been listening to my interview with kickboxing champion and martial arts film star, Don the Dragon Wilson. For those of you listening to us while on your phones, tablets, or laptops, be sure to check out www.worldblackbelt.com, the world's foremost martial arts online community. Also, Google the book 21st Century Perspectives on Martial Arts, or go to Amazon and do a search for 21st Century Perspectives on Martial Arts.
This is world champion Steve Nasty Anderson. You're listening to Martial Arts World Radio with Joseph Clark.
Elias the Spartan Theodorou has demonstrated that he is a force to be reckoned with in the UFC. He is also the winner of the Ultimate Fighter reality television program. I interviewed Elias Theodorou in 2015. We have featured Elias in other episodes of Martial Arts World Radio. We welcome him back once again for an interview which has not aired previously. Elias, why the Spartan? Sounds like a great nickname for a fighter.
Well, my first coach, and thank you. My first coach, he was a Greek descent as well. And right in the beginning when we were starting, everyone knew obviously a lot more than I did. So just my relentlessness and my unwillingness to quit. She just called me the Spartan, said I had it in me, and it stuck, and hey, the shoe fits.
What kind of reactions do you get from people about your career?
Well, at first, everyone, even funny story, many of my first opponents used to just call me a pretty boy, so they used to just look at the book cover that is myself. Ironic that I have actually done a few book covers, but with that being said, they used to judge me and expect they would walk through me, and it didn't happen.
And you've done some modeling and some stunt work. Would you tell us about that?
Yeah, like I just alluded to, I always get confused. I've done 10 romance novels, or the covers for them. I think 6 or 7 of them were Harlequin, and then the last 2 to 3 or whatever were another brand or publisher. And then I've done many different just magazines, catalogs, different, honestly, all around. I can't even list what I've done. And then you throw in the stunt work, the TV, a movie, and then, just a game show. Actually, I won a game show called Match Game on Comedy Network, so still undefeated in that.
Now, a few months ago, I had an interview with an old colleague of mine whose name was Jalal Merhi. And Jalal's a producer and a former martial arts star. He did a lot of television, or a lot of film and television. Most of his martial art films were back when I was your age, which I don't want to share how long back that was, how far back that was. But he's worked with Billy Blanks, and he worked a lot with Bolo Yeung, who, of course, Bolo Yeung appeared with Jean-Claude Van Damme in Bloodsport, and he appeared with Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. And interestingly, during the interview with Jalal, one of the things he alluded to is he said, I'm a martial artist, but I'm not a fighter. I like the art of martial art, but he said, I can't watch MMA. I can't watch guys beating each other to a pulp on TV, and that's just not for me. And I thought that was really interesting to hear a martial artist say that. And I'm sure in your travels, you must come across people who question the ethics of what you do. You seem like a very graceful guy. You seem like a gentleman fighter. How do you respond to people when they react that way?
Well, to each their own. I'm not really particularly a fan of curling, but I wouldn't stop anyone from doing it. I'd like to throw in the fact that we're 2 willing participants in competition. Fighting is one of the most primal things, and even though it is a primal thing, it's chess, not checkers. There's a lot of athletics, a lot of just sheer training and learning and whatnot, but it's all mental. Especially at this point, everyone's good at what they do, and a lot of it has to do with that last little increments of just being the more mindful person. So although I can respect his opinion, and I understand where probably his background is more more of a martial arts of defense, and remember, there's both offense and defense. So I would just say it's just two schools and maybe two generations apart.
You know, I enjoy watching MMA, and I'm a martial artist myself. I'm a big fan of MMA, and I don't, I obviously don't relate to people who say that they have a problem with it. However, I personally, although I enjoy MMA, I find hockey fights really disturbing, because in MMA, the two fighters are professional athletes. They're pursuing excellence. They've got a mutual respect for each other's abilities, and there's agreed upon rules, and there's somebody there with them. Whereas in a hockey fight, they're just irate, and these people are just pretty well ready to kill each other if they didn't have pads on and somebody to stop them. So I don't think MMA is disturbing in that respect, but I still find that I come across a lot of people who have an ethical problem with it.
Yeah, and you know what? A lot of it has to do with the fact of it's a little bit still the unknown. If you're not really familiar with it and you don't know the rules and the mechanics of it, then an outsider looking in might have that opinion of it. But if they get to know with any of the things that you mentioned, you could definitely see how mixed martial arts with two opponents that are ready and just at that level are set to do something. And your point with hockey, I would agree with. It's anything kind of goes. There's set rules with mixed martial arts.
Do you have any martial arts idols or fighters that you idolized when you were making your way up the ranks?
Right off the bat, it was the personalities for me. The Tito Ortiz, the Chuck Liddells, and then a couple in between. My obviously favorite martial artist would have to be Anderson Silva, just with how dominant of a champion he was. I actually had the pleasure to train with him in Brazil when I went down there with my coach Sergio Cunha, and just the aura he had at that time, he was honestly untouchable, and it was an amazing thing. And with that being said, he's obviously gone from God to human in the last two fights, but I'm going to be rooting for him in his next fight with Diaz. But it was just, there are many martial artists that growing up I just looked up to, and you throw in Tyson and just this ferociousness, and you throw Bruce Lee and his mysticalism. Like there's just so many different people to bring up for many different reasons.
Now, this interview is obviously not about Anderson Silva, but since you brought him up, there's a lot of fight philosophers who say that wins make you weaker, losses make you stronger. And it seemed to me that his style was getting much more and more showman and very cocky. Do you think that all those wins perhaps had gone to his head and he put his defenses down and needs to go back to basics?
Well, there's a couple of things that kind of like what I've heard from different coaches who've worked with him in this and that I wouldn't say necessarily the wins got him, but maybe a lot of the notoriety, a lot of the fame, a lot of the other stuff, the non-martial art aspect of it could have gotten away from it. But with that being said, I wouldn't use the word cocky, because he was always doing that. It was a mind game. He got you out of your element. He messed with your mind, let's just say the PG-13. And it's all Jedi mind tricks. That's what he was doing. It's just the person that he fought, Chris Weidman, didn't fall for it. And actually, just a side note, one of my training partners, Alex Ricci, who's actually fighting this weekend in Pennsylvania, he said to me one thing that was really an amazing thing, where there's always someone you can't beat. And unfortunately for Anderson Silva, that's Chris Weidman.
Now, on that note, how many fights, not to dwell on the negative, but how many fights can a professional fighter lose in the UFC before they lose their contract or get cut?
You know what? Again, you got to remember, it's not only how good you are, it's how many people want to come see you. So you can throw in the Ed Hardys, who lost 4 in a row, and if it wasn't for other health issues that actually came up, he had a heart murmur, so that stops him from competing again. He still had a contract. And then you throw in someone like Randy Couture, who has almost as many losses as he does wins, but he's considered one of the greatest. So, again, although it is a sport, and that's what makes it really different than boxing, because boxing, you lose 2-3 fights, and you're out of the picture. You're a nobody. You're a bum, right? But with mixed martial arts, if you're exciting, if you're just ready to just compete, there's always a spot for you. So it's kind of hard to work with that. Everyone's different, but one thing I would say, the bigger you are, it's one of the things I've actually recently talked with my coach. The larger the person is, the larger of a career they usually have, because the smaller weight class rely on more speed, and as you age, speed goes. But the bigger heavyweights, they're actually of the largest medium or median age. It's because power is one of the last things to go. You can still Hulk out at 35.
And the career impact on your family and your social life, how has that changed since, and I know I asked you earlier, now how's life changed for you since you won the Ultimate Fighter, but just as your career has grown, you've become more successful, what kind of impact has that taken on you socially in your circle of friends or to your family?
Well, I think now, like I said before, they're just starting to really understand it, right? My parents actually... It's really cute because, like, sometimes I'll stay with my parents because it's just where training is. If I'm going to train in Hamilton, I'm going to stay in Mississauga rather than Toronto, that kind of thing. But so I'll just hang out with my mom or whatever the case, and she'll bring up some news of martial arts or UFC that she heard, and she's asking if this person's in my weight class, or like just different things. It's just amazing to see how engaged they are into mixed martial arts and the UFC.
When you look back at your original goals and dreams for your career, was there a master plan, or are you just kind of making this up along the way?
At first, it was a little going with the flow. Like I said, me and my brother went to Calgary by ourselves and competed against the hometown guy. We were booed. We were almost halfway chased out of there. You know what I mean? And it was just a case of, let's see this. Let's go for it. Let's shoot for the stars and land on the moon kind of thing. But now, like I said, I have a great team behind me, and we have a definite plan. Nothing happens by accident. It's been a lot. It's been 3 hard years of work since I've gone pro, and the sky's the limit.
Elias, how many amateur fights did you have before you started fighting professionally?
I had one tournament in Hamilton. It was sports jiu-jitsu, which is it's a little bit of a hybrid of mixed martial arts. There's a lot less striking involved, and there's certain time limits, like you only have an opponent down for 30 seconds. But there was a national championship, and I went there, and I had, I think, 4 or 5 matches, and I was dubbed the Canadian champion. And I just knew from then there, this is what I wanted to do.
Is it surreal? I mean, you're talking about, for one thing, you're on The Ultimate Fighter. You're meeting, Dana and all sorts of people who you've probably watched on television. You're training with Anderson Silva. Is it still surreal, or has it sunk in?
It's honestly still surreal. I'm really, every once in a while I just step back and just take, because if you throw in the fact that I've only been doing this for 3 years professionally, and I have 10 fights, and I'm now ranked top 50 in my weight class in the world. And the people ahead of me and the people below me have 10 to 15 to 20 fights more than me. So just the idea of what I've been able to accomplish, what my team and I have been able to accomplish, it's a pretty amazing thing. But you can't just sit there and dwell on it. There's a lot of more hard work. I would like to say, what I talked about with one of my coaches is, I've only just got my spot in the race. Prior to this is getting my spot. I had to earn my place in the UFC. So now the race starts.
And looking back now, I get that. You've just started in the UFC, and now you're really earning your place. But looking back on all the professional fights you've had to date, what would you have done differently, looking back now?
Honestly, there's not too much here and there. The one thing I thought about, it would have been nice to kind of fight internationally a little bit more, you know what I mean, go to Japan and just fight on a small card, and just all the different stories that I've heard other people have. But honestly, I've been really lucky, and I wouldn't trade a thing. I've been so privileged, and I'm so thankful for where I am and the team that I have behind me.
Elias, would you share with us how you got onto the show The Ultimate Fighter? There must be a story behind that. Did you send in a videotape? How did that all work? Dating myself now, but how did that work out?
Basically, what ends up happening is it's an open casting, and there's requirements and whatnot. And the first aspect is you have to have 3 minimal fights and a winning record and whatnot. And there's certain criteria. I'm a little bit of a show pony, So I think I was 3 energy drinks deep after the first process, where we did a little bit of grappling, a little bit of striking stuff or whatever like that. Just the basics, just to see what you knew what you were doing. And then it's all personality tests. So a couple of Red Bulls deep, and I just chatted away, talked about my great hair, and the rest is history, I guess.
You have been listening to my interview with UFC fighter Elias the Spartan Theodorou.
Hi, I'm Don the Dragon Wilson, and you're listening to Joseph Clark at Martial Arts World Radio.
Be sure to check us out at our website at www.mawradio.com or at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube by following Martial Arts World Radio. Thank you for listening. I'm Joseph Clark, wishing you safe travels.